Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, so here we are. This is the page. This is the first page. So now, what you want to do is you want to grab the reader from word 1, page 1. It's as if you're metaphorically grabbing them by the throat, sitting them down, and saying, here's the story. Okay, and you don't want to let them go. You want to keep their attention from page 1 to the very end. You'll see here EXT. Again, how many first-time screenwriters? Show of hands. Okay. EXT is exterior. Okay? Everything will either be EXT for exterior or INT for interior. This particular one opens at Lincoln Center, so it's exterior Lincoln Center Day. Everyone knows what Lincoln Center is. It's pretty universal. Big, beautiful place in New York. The first time that you introduce a character, the name appears in all caps. Unless the person requesting it, if you're that blessed and lucky, asks you to do otherwise. Okay, but the first time that the character's name appears, it's all capital letters. 26, the age follows. Okay. Now, from there you see we go to a black screen. Another thing that you're going to see here that you don't want to put in a spec script is camera directions. Here I had to do it because there was no other way to describe it. And again, this is draft 25. This is written for a producer. There's a big difference between writing on spec when you're giving it to somebody cold versus a producer saying, okay, I'd like you to do this, this, and this when you hand me your draft. Okay? So let me just read briefly. The sounds of wind. I capitalized wind. Why? Because we have a sound editor, and they need to see that note. As it gently blows through the trees. Curiously, the sounds of two men boxing rises and blends with the crackling sounds of a record needle as it drops onto the vinyl. So right away, we're trying to create atmosphere. Pull back to reveal, so we're seeing black. We're pulling up, and now we're seeing it's a record. Who here has seen a movie called Talented Mr. Ripley? Fabulous, beautiful, gorgeous movie. There's a scene in there where we've got that exact same shot where it's a record playing. He's trying to study up on jazz really quickly. And it's a black screen, pulls back, and then we see the record playing and the needle. So it's the same effect. Okay, so we rejoin it. Rapid succession. Notice I have music builds. I'm not writing the music choice. I know what I want that music to sound like, but that's not my job. I'm the screenwriter. That's the music supervisor's job. That's the director's job, and probably the executive producer as well. Okay? That's way down the line. That's not my job. All I want to do is do what? Tell the story and get out of the way. Yes, sir? Well, I'm just using it as a device to get everybody into the story. It appears one more time at the very end of the movie. It's bookended, which is another device we're going to get into a little bit. The movie ends where it begins. Talk about a hero's journey and things coming full circle. All of the characters that we're meeting in the first act are together at the end of the third act, but they're healed. Okay? But that's a bookend device. You start in a certain place, and then you come back there. So, again, going over screenplay nomenclature, and this is very basic stuff here that I'm giving you. So we want to, again, keep it moving quickly in rapid succession as the music builds. Close on, which is a fancy way of giving a camera direction without really doing it, just letting the cinematographer and director know that these are close shots. So we've got the hands being wrapped, the foot being wrapped in the ballet slipper, muscular foot of an African-American ballet dancer. She slips on a ballet slipper. And then the hand of a Caucasian boy as he wraps it in protective boxing hand wraps. And then we cut to a muscular foot of what must be a middle-aged Caucasian woman as she slips on a ballet slipper. And then the fist of an African-American man as it completes the hand wrap process. So we've got four, they're similar images, but they're on different people of different ages and different creeds. So now we're left with a question. Where are all these people headed? How are they going to meet? What's going to happen to them? You always want to pose questions in the mind of the audience. So then we see the word here, super, 10 years earlier. So after we've seen that, we have a lot of information so far on this first page. Now we go to a mansion. I beg your pardon? Okay, the super. A super is a technical term for words that are printed on a movie screen. So sometimes when you're watching, let's say you're watching JFK, and they'll put the date of his assassination, November 22nd, 1963. That is written out as a super. That's referred to as a super. So those words 10 years earlier are going to appear across the screen. Whether we fade to black after that last pair of feet and hands are wrapped up is a choice that the director, the editor, and other people are going to make. I'm not going to edit from the page, direct from the page, or do music from the page, unless I'm asked to do it. But I know that we have to have that piece of information in there because we're starting with him as a man and then we're flashing back to 10 years prior. So then we go to the scene in the house. You'll see it's exterior, O'Neill Mansion, magic hour. Magic hour refers to that hour of the day where the sun is going down and it's just that beautiful orange, purple, golden thing happening in the sky. So we've got this backyard and we've got these two guys having a boxing match, a very friendly boxing match. It's a ritual, but it's basically the mentor character with the lead character. But you'll see as the names are described, their ages appear, and there's a very brief description of each character, okay, which you want to do because when you're reading this for the first time as your producer, you have to know what? Well, who are we going to put in it? Who fits these roles? All right, so you see the capital letters, the ages I should say, and the description, a brief description of them. So let's cut to a couple of quick notes here. So exterior, yes. I beg your pardon?
When you are writing abbreviating someone's name like Kim, you always have the same parentheses that people, do that shorter.
Well, that's a good question. The question is the lead character, whose name is Cameron. We call him Cam. We make a note in the descriptions, okay, the actual descriptions, that he is Cameron O'Neill, but he is affectionately known as Cam or something to that effect. And then from that point on, we refer to him as Cam, C-A-M, for the life of the screenplay, and that's it. So you note that in your stage directions. Okay, so exterior, EXT, interior, sorry? Oh, yes, this. Sorry. Okay, interior. So it's where we are, inside or outside. Let's put. Okay, so we always need to know, we need a sense of equilibrium all throughout. And this is the nomenclature that we use to create that equilibrium. Are we inside or are we outside? Exterior or interior? Where are we? A house, a field. What time is it? These are three things we must know for all scenes. Okay? For all scenes. Does everybody have that? This is something that's universal, and pretty much any instructor that you see or spend time with will tell you this. Now, let's go back a little further, actually. When you're writing descriptions, you really don't want to go on for too long. I'm trying to find a good example for you here. You want most of your action to be, most of your story to be told with action, not words. You see that the dialogue here is you don't have very long monologues here. Okay, now, you want to try to keep your dialogue to no more than 5 or 6 lines at any given exchange. Sometimes that's a principle. Is it an absolute, line in the sand rule? No. Sometimes you have to. If you look at any movie that has a third act monologue, which is what they're referred to as, one of my best examples, one of the best examples I think is Scent of a Woman, where Al Pacino is up in the hall there with the kids during the trial, and he gives that long monologue. That's probably a page and a half of dialogue, but there's a reason for it. He's basically summing up all of the wrongs that have been done to this kid through his whole life, and it fits, it works. If it works, you use it. If it doesn't work, you don't. But as a general rule, what you want to try and make happen is tell the story with pictures and not words, not big, long slugs of dialogue. So here you'll see that the dialogue, I'm just going to show very quickly here. Dialogue, single lines. Not very chunky. You'll see that? Your eye moves quickly down the page. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is that all character names should be distinctly different. So there's a reason for that. Let's say you've got a guy named Dan, and then you've got a guy named Sam. Do you see the problem that creates for the person doing the coverage? This is where so many people that do coverage or read, this is where they get cynical, and this is where they learn right off the bat if the writer knows what they're doing. Because if you pick up a page 1 and you see that, we're out of there. Because that's very taxing for a reader. Very taxing. When you've got names that are so similar that you have to kind of squint at it to tell them apart. So you want to make all of the names in a different structure. First letter and first vowel especially. Okay? You want to keep them as distinctly different as you can. All right? I'm sorry? Well, yeah. I mean, it's just a very taxing thing. And it makes it difficult to read not only for the person doing for the coverage, but hopefully you're going to have a director on board that's going to make your movie. They're not going to tolerate that, and they're going to know when they read your script for the first time that you haven't done your homework, because that's very, very taxing, not only for the person reading it, but also for the audience. So you don't want that. You want distinctly different names. Also, try to avoid parentheses. That's called directing from the page. Now, so many times you'll see when you look at a screenplay, you'll see something like this. You'll see parentheses right after the character's name, and you're basically telling the actor how to deliver the line. Well, that's not your job. You don't want to do that. You don't want to direct from the page. That's called DFP. So when you see screenplay coverage come back and they send you back the screenplay, here's the note that you'll see. They'll write DFP in that place. That means directing from the page. You don't want to do that. That's the actor's job. Yes? I'm sorry?
Like when you're doing the parentheses, like if you're saying like this person is on the phone or they're talking to a character, you don't do that in parentheses.
Here's the rule with parentheses. You don't want to do that more than 2 or 3 times in your screenplay. If you need to write something like that, put it in your stage directions. Put it, in the sake of your example, if it were somewhere in here, it would be Elizabeth talks on the phone right here. Okay? You want to try and avoid using parentheses anytime that you can. All right? You can get away with it 2 or 3 times, but when you've got page after page after page of parentheses after character dialogue slugs, it means that you're directing from the page. And remember, you want to respect the actors and the director at all times. You don't want to do that. Okay, so you're going to avoid that. So in terms of description, always use present tense verbs So what does this mean? Nobody is walking across the floor of the room talking to the people in the audience. Peter walks across the room. You want to create the picture in the mind of the audience. Walking is passive voice. Or walked is passive. It's also literary. It's not cinematic, it's literary. You want to keep all your verbs perfect present tense, active verbs. Okay? Verbs, action words, everyone knows. So the character walks. When you do it that way, you're helping the reader see it. But when you read a screenplay where you see all these passive verbs, for some reason it doesn't create the picture. What you're trying to do is paint the picture in the mind of the audience of what's going on the page, so that when they're moving their eye down the page, they're seeing in their mind what you're describing with your words. And if you use present tense verbs, perfect present tense verbs, you'll have an easier time doing that. If you're using those passive verbs and you're describing everything in the past tense, well, it reads like a novel. And that's not the same thing. So you want to keep that going a little bit. So we've got negation, and then negation of the negation. So let's pick an example. But first, let's talk a little bit about what that actually is. So you've got your hero and your main character, and they're working toward a goal. And they're almost all the way down the road to accomplishing the solution to the conflict that they've set out to solve. They're almost there. But then something happens right before the solution is manifested that does what? Wipes out all their actions. And guess what? All hope is now lost. But then the character, it's most effective if the character does this as a matter of choice. The character makes a decision that then negates the negation. So there is a negation to the solution. There's an intervention that stops that solution from happening, but then there is a negation of the negation. How many people here have seen a movie called Midnight Run? Hey, all right. Midnight Run's a terrific movie. It's Robert De Niro. And I'll tell you briefly, I can describe it to you, so if you are able to rent it, it's great, but it's one of the best examples of screenwriting that I know of. You've got a bail bondsman from Los Angeles who is a policeman who was kicked out of the police force because he wouldn't take a bribe from a Chicago mafia guy. The Chicago mafia guy is trying to kill an accountant who has all of the knowledge of all of his dirty deeds, and not only that, he stole a bunch of money from him. So as it turns out, the bail bondsman, played by Robert De Niro, is sent to New York in what is described as only a short job, a midnight run, to go to New York and bring this fugitive accountant back to Los Angeles. He skipped bail. He's played by Charles Grodin. Everybody knew Charles Grodin, terrific actor. So it's a buddy-buddy on-the-road cop movie. It's very funny, very entertaining, but also very poignant. So he finally finds the accountant, played by Charles Grodin, and he's referred to as the Duke. And he's going to bring him back to Los Angeles and get his bail bonds money. Okay, and this is after a series of adventures on the road, all of which are riotously funny. So now he has him and he's in Los Angeles airport, but the problem is that the mafioso guy, who also ruined Robert De Niro's character's life, Jack Walsh, ruins his life, has now recaptured the Duke and De Niro's character makes a deal to get him back in exchange for some information on computer disks that the accountant stole from him. So they're doing this exchange in an airport, in McCarran Airport in Las Vegas. So the FBI is there, and Robert De Niro is wearing a wire. Now this is a guy, this character is established as somebody that always did the right thing, would never take a bribe, and would rather suffer and lose everything, including his family, than go on the wrong side of principle. And he never asks for help. Those are principles of his character's composition. So he's in this position, and he's in the airport, and the gangster comes in to meet him, and they're ready to make these deals, and he has to hand over the discs, and then the gangster will hand back Charles Grodin safe and sound. So he gets to the airport, and De Niro doesn't see the accountant anywhere. So finally, he asks the gangster to bring him out, and then he'll hand him the discs, which he finally does. He hands them the discs, but the gangster reneges on the deal, and now here come all the hitmen to shoot both of them and kill them. But the wire has gone dead, and the FBI can't hear what's going on. So the character makes an action that he's never done before in his life. He calls out for help, and it's very metaphoric. He yells out, "Serrano's got the discs, Serrano's got the discs." First time in his life he calls out for help. In come the SWAT team, everybody's arrested. Now De Niro gets to take Charles Grodin back to Los Angeles, and he's going to get his money, but he's not going to get the big coffee shop. Okay, he just wants to make this deal and get $50,000, but it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. So now he lets the Duke go, which is why I got ahead of myself. He lets the Duke go. He decides not to give him back. He decides not to collect the bail, and he's going to let the Duke go. So there was a negation. There's 4 or 5 negations. First, he was at the airport, so that was negated. The calling out for help negates the negation. But now he's back. Charles Grodin's character is back in Los Angeles with De Niro, and he decides to let him go. So they're at the phone booth, and he calls the bail bondsman, and he says, "Hey, you want to talk to the Duke? He's right here." He's right here. He says, "Hey, you son of a bitch." He says, "Now say goodbye. I'm letting him go." Click. So now he's decided on principle, because he's grown to be a buddy of this guy, he's going to let him go. So there's the negation. He's not going to get his little coffee shop with his bail bonds money. He decides to let him go. As he's walking out the door, the Duke calls him back and says, "Hey, come here. I've got something for you. This better be good." Well, he takes off a money belt that has $300,000 on it that he's been carrying on him the whole time. So negation of the negation. But it's as a choice of the character. And at first he doesn't want to take it, and Charles Grodin's character tells him, "Take it. It's not a bribe. You already let me go." So again, it was a choice of the character that created the negation of the negation and the ultimate solution.